Um, we got a big, huge couple of weeks of some great, phenomenal Golden Boy cards. Shouts out, kudos to Golden Boy for putting on some, at least putting together some amazing cards. I can't necessarily say that the fights will turn out to be great, but on paper, these are very highly competitive and interesting fights. Kudos to those guys for putting this shit together. I was inspired. Big ups to my boy, PullCounter. Back out here making boxing videos, which is great to see. But he did a list of future pound-for-pound stars, or guys that he's watching to be or end up on the pound-for-pound list in the future. And the reason why I'm not doing that is because my list was virtually identical to his, except for maybe a fighter or two. One fighter I was very interested in is Earl Spencer Jr. I seen him fight a couple times. He looked real good to me. But you could tell that he was very young, hadn't been, seasoned yet. So I'm very interested to see how that dude's career turns out. He would have actually been top on my list. But outside of that, it was pretty much identical and shit. And like I said, maybe a fighter or two. But what I have is my wish list for 2014 or the near future, maybe 2014, 2015. One of the things that I'm looking forward to is the death of the Flomos. There are many Flomosexuals running around this bitch on YouTube, acting real feminine and shit, real feminine. And it's just amazing that, some of these guys act the way they act about a fucking other man, like the one thing about like certain guys, and I've debated with certain motherfuckers, PullCounter being one of them, and Boxologist, it's another dude that I've debated, with about like Floyd Mayweather and his place in history amongst the greatest of all time. And it's cool to debate the point. And I'm okay with anybody who feels that he is the greatest of all time. But it's those ridiculous motherfuckers, man. And there's some out here, and y'all know who they are. You know what I'm saying? But those are two guys that I can think of off the top of my head who I believe have that opinion or position. But I'm okay to debate with those guys about it, I definitely wouldn't consider those guys Flomos, but y'all know it's some motherfucking Flomosexuals out here, bro. The next thing I'm looking for, I'm looking to see more promoters in boxing. Because whenever we hear about a big card or HBO or Showtime putting money into a card or a fight, it's always a top rank or a Golden Boy fight. Every blue moon, Sergio Martinez may be allowed to have a big show, with Lou DiBella, but I believe that, in order for these fighters of this next generation not to be robbed of greatness and events, these networks have to allow other promoters to promote other fighters. The only way to have big fights is to have superstar fighters. When you have a situation, let's say like Adrian Broner and Keith Thurman, people are going to call for that fight much sooner than either guy would like to see that fight happen, if it were to ever happen. But the problem is the lack of interesting opponents outside of each other. So in order for, if I, being a promoter, in order for me to do my job the best way that I can, I almost have to help another promoter promote fighters in similar weight classes in order to give my guys the best opportunity to maximize on what they do in the ring. Some guys understand that, some won't, but I believe that it's very vital for the health of the sport for there to be more promoters allowed to promote and have cards on these big networks. Another thing that I'm looking forward to, and this came up very recently with a couple of fights. More importantly, the Pacquiao Bradley, but it later became an issue with some other fights. But people have to accept the differences of opinion when it comes to scoring boxing. The sport as a whole is subjective. Unlike any other sport. For instance, there are judgment calls in every sport. Whether the guy got his foot down in the end zone, whether he contained possession all the way through the catch, whether he got the shot off before the shot clock went off, whether he was in the crease when he scored the goal, was it fan interference for the home run, so forth and so on. There is many instances where there are judgment calls in sports. The only difference is in those sports, those judgment calls don't change the outcome. And what I mean by that is this. Let's say there's a shot at the end of the game or end of the half. Some may say, well, he didn't get it off on time. Some will say he got it off on time. But either or is a moot point if the motherfucker don't make the shot. So it don't matter. Same thing in football. If the dude don't catch the ball, it don't matter whether he got his feet in or not, or he stepped over the line or whatever. It don't matter if the dude don't make the catch. So there are things that have to be actually executed for certain judgment calls to even matter. In boxing, one decides whether the punch landed, or whether the punch was effective or more effective, or whether he ducked the punch, or So I think that people just have to come to terms that no matter how one way or lopsided you see a fight, there are other people who will see that somewhat different. That's just human nature. There is no rhyme and reason, no logic, except for the fact that people like different things. Man. Another thing that that came up a few times in 2013 that I think should be addressed in the future is the amount of holding that's allowed in boxing. And I stated this before, boxing is the only sport where you can blatantly disregard a written rule but not be penalized for it at all. I believe that it should not be allowed for holding to be part of a strategic, it shouldn't be allowed to be in a strategy. You shouldn't be able to strategically hold a guy in order to gain an advantage in a fight. In football, if you're a cornerback and you're trying to guard Calvin Johnson, because he's bigger than you, don't mean that, 20 yards down the field, you can just hold him, whenever you feel like you're getting beat. Well, you can, but it doesn't come without consequence. In boxing, there is no consequence for holding. And that's the point that I'm making. There should be a lot less holding allowed in boxing. I believe that Klitschko fight, absolutely ridiculous. Another fight that I kind of felt that there was excessive holding, in my opinion, was like the Danny Garcia-Lucas Matisse fight. You could obviously see that there was a strategic, he used that in his strategy, strategically to hold him whenever they would get inside. Now, it's kind of fucked up because there is no penalty for that. So I believe that boxing would do itself a great justice by not allowing so much holding. I mean, I know it's clinching is part of the sport, but when you see that a guy employs that in his strategy, I believe that that should not be allowed. Another thing that I would like to see is big fights in more cities and countries. I know that boxing isn't what it once was, but part of that reason, I believe, is you never have recognizable, like, very seldom do you get big name fighters fighting outside of Las Vegas. It rarely happens. I believe more big fights should happen in more places besides Las Vegas and Atlantic City. I mean, I know we got this card that's coming up weekend, I believe in San Antonio maybe. Then they got one at the Barclays. But I mean, there are a lot of other cities where you could possibly put fights where I believe that a lot of people will come out and support, you know. I believe that is vital to get more casual fans interested in boxing. You know, it's just my opinion. I could be wrong. And one of the main things that I'm looking forward to is the retirement of Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. The main reason for that is this. With this whole Cold War, HBO, Showtime, Golden Boy, Top Rank beef, these other fighters are being robbed of their greatness because Ruslan Provodnikov won't get a chance to fight Danny Garcia and prove that he might be the best 140-pound fighter, or Lucas Matisse, or whoever the fuck else there might be. You know, Adrian Broner won't get a chance to fight Pacquiao or Tim Bradley or Juan Marquez. And, you know, Keith Thurman may not get a chance to fight those guys. You know, Triple G and Peter Quillen, fucking Sergio Martinez. You know, these guys are getting robbed of a chance to become true greats in the sport, to be placed in history with the Ray Robinsons and Bernard Hopkins and the Roy Joneses of the past, because it's too many fucking fighters that they won't fight to propel them to that greatness. And because these two guys aren't fighting, there ain't no reason to make any other fight for those promoters. So the retirement of those guys, being Pacquiao and Floyd, may help usher in the new era of boxing that we all hope that we can see in the near future. And the sooner those two out the way, because I'm really not a fan of either guy. I mean, you know, I don't, you know, dislike either one, but not necessarily a big fan of either, you know. I don't necessarily look forward to those two guys getting in the ring with each other or anybody else for that matter. But and the reason being is because that whole debacle involving those two led to a domino effect that has affected the careers of many other fighters. You know, it's bad enough that if you ain't with Top Rank or Golden Boy, 9 times out of 10, you ain't gonna be fighting on the networks, which means that you're probably not gonna be making, you know, those guys, they just, you know, when they're out the way, I believe that boxing can become a healthier sport, you know. It's too much talk surrounding Floyd Mayweather, and, you know, and I know to the Mayweather fans and the fucking Flomo Nation that it irritates the fuck out of them that a dude can get his lights turned the fuck out win one fight against a guy that he was supposed to demolish anyway. And all of a sudden it's like, ooh, we want to see Mayweather Pacquiao again. What the fuck, dog? Are you serious? That shit is annoying to me. So I can't imagine if I was a fucking Flomo how I would feel about that shit. It's ridiculous, you know? It's absolutely ridiculous. There are a lot of fights that I would like to see that won't happen based on the domino effect of those guys. And one last thing I would like to see happen is for us as fans to not play promoter and accountant and business manager and agent for fighters. You know? Now, there is a common sense approach to boxing where, okay, if you can fight an undefeated, devastating hard puncher for $500, or you can fight this nerd who was a math genius in school who decided that he wanted to try boxing and he's 4-12 and you can make $500 fighting that dude, yeah, you're gonna fight that dude. You know what I'm saying? But when we ain't talking about these guys at this higher tax bracket, who gives a fuck if this dude is making $2 million or 3.5? You know what I'm saying? I, as a fan, want to see the best fights. You know what I'm saying? I'm not gonna cry for this guy to get an extra $2 million when he's getting $2 already. I'm not gonna cry if Floyd makes $20 million instead of $40, or Manny Pacquiao makes $17 instead of $25. So I can't be on board with making excuses for guys like, you know, fucking, you know, Adonis Stevenson. You know, if they offered him Andre Ward, Bernard Hopkins, and Sergey Kovalev, and they were gonna pay him the same amount for all 3 fights, hell yeah, he should take fucking Bernard Hopkins. That's a no-brainer. That's just common sense. You know what I'm saying? But if the offer on the table is, okay, you can get $2 million for Bernard Hopkins, you can get 2.5 for Kovalev, and you can get 3 for Andre Ward. You don't have a reason not to fight Andre Ward at that point, or vice versa if that same scenario was, you know, planned out to Andre Ward. But see, then too, this goes back to one of my other points. If other promoters aren't promoting fighters in your weight division, you're fucked. Which is pretty much happening to Andre Ward. He beat most of the guys who had a name in his division. So now he's fucked to a point where everybody is talking about he needs to move up, improve himself, and all of this shit. But how do we penalize a guy for doing exactly what we want our fighters to do, which is clean out a division? You know what I mean? But that's just my list of things that I would like to see. Big ups to my boy PullCounter for you know. Oh yeah, and I got you on your Christian Laettner awards. That was some good shit. I'm gonna go you know, because I don't watch a lot of Olympic boxing. I you know, it isn't the same to me. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I kind of keep up with it and I pay attention to it, but not like pro boxing. So what I will do is I will come back with a Tim Tebow award. You know, that guy who got lucky and won a couple fights and everybody jumped on the bandwagon, and then eventually you seen that the motherfucker wasn't shit. It's your boy, Rollo Jenkins. Holla at your boy.